Welcome back. Still with me in the studio, Daniel Kinnear, Senior Executive Associate, Africa Strategy Group, and Seydou, Kane, Business Development Leader at DuPont. Guys, if this is also dangerous and it's going to be costing billions, why is it that nothing is being done? We've been talking about governments just sitting down and doing nothing, but when is the reality check going to actually hit us?
Well, I wouldn't agree that nothing is being done, particularly from the business perspective. So there are a lot of ways, and there is a misconception that complying to environment or complying to a greener approach to business will cost a lot of money. I think that we develop different approaches. For instance, at DuPont Sustainable Solution, we have a consulting arm whereby we believe that bringing more sustainable or helping businesses to be more sustainable require mainly two things. First of all, a mindset change, a cultural change that has to be operated in combination with a certain degree of work around energy efficiency and operational discipline. So working on those two levers, there is a lot that can be achieved.
But I think a lot of people don't realize that you can actually save money by instituting sustainable measures within your own business. There are savings that you can make there.
Yeah, and I think that maybe because of the global economic climate, there was a time when we were a major consumer generations, several consecutive. And secondly, there was a lot of waste because there was ample resource at a cheap price with cheap labor. Those fundamentals in business, Jeremy, have changed.
Yeah.
And I think, if anything, it will help drive business to finding more sustainable, in relation to the environment, more sustainable ways of doing business. I think secondly is that we also caught in at the crossroads between intellectual property and how we develop the appropriate technologies. DuPont will spend hundreds of millions, if not billions, in R&D, but protect that R&D, have patents and trademarks. So there is, at any given time, there may be in 3 different locations under 3 different pieces of IP, the solution to some of the challenges we face. But unless we find a way legally
to share that,
to form the JVs, the special purpose vehicles, whatever it is, in order to create that, use that as a catalyst to create those solutions we're looking for. So as much as we responded very quickly to saving the banks, our chances of moving very quickly on IP and optimizing the investments that DuPont and others have put in over generations is some of the challenges in the conversations that business has to have.
Okay, I'm going to be the absolute skeptic here. And based on purely what you've just said now, I've got to turn around and say, nothing's going to happen. Because I can't see governments coordinating themselves. Let's look at Africa alone. Okay, South Africa, the largest emitter of carbon gases into emissions on the continent. Africa's problems are so raw and so basic. I can't see any of Africa's leaders turning around and saying what's more important right now is sustainability issues.
Well, you see, Jeremy, there is a mixed perspective right around that. I would argue that there are some positive signals, right? If you look at South Africa, for instance, the 800 million fund, renewable energy fund that was approved. You have as well some moves towards small and medium companies as well. The IDC set up a $500 million fund as well to support those organizations. Those are all moving in the good direction. The discussion around carbon tax is also, a good conversation to have because it puts things in perspective and say, hey, what do we do? Now, if you look at an Africa perspective, I'm rather an optimistic. Right, I see that a lot of things are happening. There was I was just reading recently this report, this BCG report around the Africa Challengers, they call it. They selected 40 companies, regional and progressively international companies in Africa, throughout Africa. And what you see is that those organizations are moving so fast, have the fundamentals right, and now have to make those decisions. Because the real question for business and for Africa in general, are we going to play catch up, you know, when everything starts happening and so on, and comply then? Or can we leapfrog today? Can we start doing it? And there are some companies that have this ability. There is a willingness, but it all comes to two things: leadership and also the perspective. Because sustainability is not a short-term game. It's a journey, it's a long-term play.
You see, he is so positive.
Yeah.
Are you in the same? Are you in the same space, or are you leaning more to my side, the skeptic?
No, I think I'm inclined to be, well, cul-de-sac. I have to be positive about this thing. I just hope something comes out.
Convince you.
because
he is convincing.
Yeah, because you asked the question. You asked the question about leadership. I think South Africa has tried to provide the leadership on COP17, trying to get something out of it, even if it's an extension to Kyoto. Notwithstanding, the United States is not a signatory. However, I think unlike the boardrooms, the cabinet rooms are preoccupied with a lot of survival issues. I mean, we just spoke about the governments that have just come on stream, and others who will be elected very soon, including Barack Obama, who has deserted the struggle for some sort of framework to address climate change. And I think, and that is why I think, even because of your program and the issues that it addresses, is that business has this rare opportunity, probably never in 2 decades, to take control. Because as citizens, we look to them to produce products cleaner, quicker, cleaner, and safer. What we're asking for governments is create the regulatory space to allow them to do that, give them incentive, taxes. Carbon may not be the response. So what we're dealing with the consequences rather than the causes. We say, we're going to tax you. And I think that's a big issue. But I think also sometimes there's confused signals when governments through sovereign funds and other things like the PIC, is that they get to a crossroad. And recently South Africa revised the legislation, opened up the space on energy production, barely a year ago, and allowed 5 or 6 or 7 other independent producers to be coming in on renewables. 2 weeks ago, government issues a 1.9 billion rand guarantee to Eskom to come back into the space,
of course,
where the independents
was supposed to be playing,
where business can create small clusters of sustainable energy generation, and yet we find government bringing in a monopoly back into their space with taxpayer monies as a guarantor of 1.9 billion. Yet IDC has a fraction of that money, and I can bet you they haven't disbursed anything. And if they have disbursed, it's insignificant for the South African business or for businesses to raise capital at this moment. It's too expensive, or it's not available.
Okay.
So, but no, I don't.
A linger of hope somewhere, right?
Wow. I don't know why I said I was optimistic.
And you said you were being positive.
I think if we recognize these things, we can deal with them. You know.
Let's bring it right down to you and me. I own a small business. What can I do? I've used this analogy before. A panel beating firm in Alberton. What can I do to make my part, my contribution, more sustainable? What do I need to do?
All right. I think it's, as I say, it's a combination of things, right? The first element, and the way I'm going to answer is we look at the small business the same way we look at a big business, right? Yep. So you look at the energy consumption and the consumption map of the company. You know, where do you spend most energy? What times do you use the energy, etc., etc. You would definitely look at as well, where can you bring in alternative sources of energy, renewable energy. You know, talking about photovoltaics, for instance. You know, why don't you put some, etc., during the day? You know, leverage this energy that you get cheap and free for a long period of time, and then when you know it's covered or whatever, you switch to the grid, for instance. The very important one as well is going to we're going to work around the belief. You have to believe that it is possible, you know, to run your business, because when you start looking at the numbers, you know, step back, you know, have to invest in this and that and so on. So you have to drive this leader's belief, the owner's belief.
That's where it starts.
Exactly.
It starts in a belief.
Exactly.
That you can make a difference by changing your attitude and the way you operate and the things that you do.
Yeah,
and we're just not getting it, are we?
No, and I think there are incredible examples. Ilovor, some of the vineyards are using biofuel, or the recycling. I mean, there's an incredible amount of going on for the small business, the small and medium-sized businesses, 100, 200 people. One of the biggest problems is access to capital, because if the banking system has no incentive and is skeptical about the possibility of growing a profitable, sustainable business, how are you going to raise the capital? Secondly, if the DuPonts recognize the opportunity to grant licenses on their IP by sort of manufacturing in developing countries, where their technology and skills base can be constructed, and then create small businesses. Businesses that are part of the big business. Businesses that are profitable.
This is a yes or no question to both of you. Is COP17 going to achieve anything?
It's a difficult one, Jeremy.
No, I said it's a yes or no.
As I said,
don't be a politician.
I'm an optimistic, so I would say yes.
Yes.
I'll say yes because it'll reveal how weak we were in putting it together.
They're both right. I really do.